And in progressive areas, they'll put in progressive anti-gun laws.
Progressive, what a joke that word is. Regressive is what they are. They have nothing to do with progress. They are trying to take us back to a more feudal, hierarchical society where there's the people on top who know better than everyone else, and the rest of the public is under their supposedly beneficent thumbs.
For those of us with a little historical knowledge, you might remember 2013 when all these bad gun laws started coming through Colorado. Well-intentioned, of course, and they had such a backlash that 3 sitting senators were kicked out of office, 2 by recall and 1 by threat of recall. First time that's ever happened in Colorado history. You don't mess with the Second Amendment. Until this year. Dave Kopel, who runs our Second Amendment project, along with the research director here at Independence, there's nobody who knows this issue better than you, so let me ask a couple things. It seems to me the anti-gunnies in Colorado have gotten a lot smarter. Am I wrong? Smarter in the way they can win.
Yes, so here's one example of that. In the crackdown on law-abiding gun owners as their perverse punishment of decent people for the crime committed by that individual at the King Soopers. One of the things they're going to do is create this Office of Gun Violence Prevention, $3 million within the Colorado Department of Health, to be staffed, I guarantee you, by people who are related to the Bloomberg blob of anti-gun stuff. So it's to create a permanent institutional combat center to weaponize the Department of Health on a permanent basis for anti-gun propaganda.
No, they're not, David. They are working on gun safety and science so that we can get better data on gun issues to help save lives.
Well, what we've seen from the Colorado Department of Health this year, which has already been weaponized by Governor Polis against the right to arms, is a lot of it is bogus science where they'll have a scale on one side for one thing and then a different scale on the other side for something else. And by changing the scales, they're able to produce this chart of lines going like this to fake out legislators, most of whom are innumerate, into thinking that they have to pass some gun control law. Let me just give you another example. In 2001, the United Nations was considering this program of action on international gun control. Our UN ambassador John Bolton was the head of the U.S. Office of Disarmament Affairs. And so he was very active, and on all the substantive issues, he was able to convince the Bush White House we're going to hold the line. No, we're not going to. So everything in the content of that program of action that was eventually adopted was sufficiently changed so it was okay. There was no ban on transferring guns to non-state actors, like supposedly Taiwan, which China doesn't.
When you say arms, are we talking jet fighters? Are we talking about a gun, a handgun, or a rifle for individual use?
This was covering small arms, so it would include firearms and things like that. But the one, as under the direction of the White House, the one thing that Bolton and the U.S. team at the UN ended up having to agree with is, okay, we're not going to make any substantive concessions on this thing, but we're going to allow it to be institutionalized. And so we'll have an institution within the UN that'll have a permanent interest in this. And as Bolton wrote in his recent book, well, that turned out to be the whole ballgame, because yes, you can win the battles on the substance in the short term, but then you create this institutional propaganda organization that's going to be there. So the Bloomberg will be part of the the Colorado government.
Political infrastructure wins.
Yes.
It takes time. You build up things that affect the political culture, and before you know it, the narrative changes, the science changes, and the officials change, and over time, we lose our Second Amendment rights.
Precisely, and that's the purpose of this office, is to institutionalize the war on law-abiding gun owners.
And it's also $3 million a year from other things, like helping homeless people or helping people who are handicapped or educating kids or fixing potholes. This is our tax money going to work against taxpayers.
Well, don't worry, because they will also start receiving grants from the Bloomberg Billionaire Coalition. So they'll be able to spend even more money and to a significant extent beyond taxpayer control.
Lovely. All right. When I said they're getting smarter, they're starting to put in tinier bills. That is, the thing about gun control is it only goes in one direction. We limit magazines. Okay, then we make the background check unworkable. Okay, then we have this ridiculous red flag bill. All right, that does nothing. But it all goes this way. It never goes towards freedom. It goes here. What are they working on this year? And they've got at least 3 or 4 bills in the hopper.
4 bills, so all of which will pass because, I've been testifying in the Colorado legislature since 1989. And the norm is, in Colorado, which actually is much better than Congress in this way, they're actually interested in what the witnesses have to say. Any citizen can testify. And sometimes, if a citizen makes a good point, somebody will suggest a modification in the bill to take that into account. Not on this. This whole thing was worked out in advance with the Democratic leadership and the governor's office and the gun ban lobbies. And this is just going to be jammed through on a party line vote. And so when citizens come and testify, it's a nice kabuki ritual, but it has absolutely zero to do with what the legislature is ultimately going to jam down on people.
But I heard even Tom Sullivan, who is one of the leaders for gun control in the legislature, say, we're not going to do an assault weapon ban because it won't have an effect. So what are they doing?
Well, they're, first of all, they've got a bill to repeal our protection. Colorado, like most states, has a preemption law, which says that either some or all gun control laws should be uniform statewide, because people move around the state. This isn't 1880 where you might not go out of your county for 3 months. As with mobility, people need one set of consistent laws to comply with.
If you're driving through Denver and they've got a ban on 15-round magazines, but your gun has 15-round magazines, while you're en route, you're in trouble. Or if you work there, you're in trouble. Or if it makes a patchwork of crazy laws. And in progressive areas, they'll put in progressive anti-gun laws.
Progressive, what a joke that word is. Regressive is what they are. They have nothing to do with progress. They are trying to take us back to a more feudal, hierarchical society where there's the people on top who know better than everyone else, and the rest of the public is under their supposedly beneficent thumbs.
My hometown, your hometown, which has things like tolerance and celebrate diversity literally plastered on the city walls and posters, they don't like guys like us. We are evil to them. I own guns that they want to ban and tried to ban, and it was that very preemption law that said, no, Boulder, you don't have the right to make Caldera a criminal, put him in jail for up to a year for each magazine he has that's over 10 rounds. You don't have that authority. Well, when this passes, they will have the authority, and I again will be an outlaw.
Well, and not only you as a Boulder resident, but people who travel through. So, for example, when they did the magazine ban in 2013, it said if you already own a magazine, you can keep it. So you bought a Glock 17 handgun back in 1989. The Glock 17 has a 17-round magazine. That is, you can't sell it in Colorado, you can't give it away, but if you had it before the ban was enacted, you can keep it and lawfully carry it and all those things, but not in Boulder. So
when this law, preemption law,
which they will then reenact later this year. So somebody from Jefferson County who just happens to be traveling through Boulder, stops in a store to go shopping, all that perfectly legal activities, can then be arrested and sent to jail in Boulder for possessing a magazine that is completely legal under statewide law, but then would be illegal in Boulder. And this crackdown on unlicensed carry is one of the most perverse, malicious parts of what they're doing.
Explain.
Okay. In Colorado, since 2003, we have a fair and objective system for issuing concealed carry permits to law-abiding adults over 21.
Last time I saw statistics, over 9% of all Colorado adults have a concealed weapon permit.
Right. And they are about the most law-abiding group in Colorado. To get a concealed carry permit, you got to go to the sheriff's office. You have to be fingerprinted. You have to pass a safety training class. By the law, the sheriffs have to report to the state legislature every year on how many permits did you issue, how many did you renew, how many permits did you revoke, what reasons did you have for revocation. And under the Colorado law, the sheriffs actually have a lot of discretion, so they can revoke a permit just based on an arrest rather than a conviction,
Yes, right.
and they frequently do. That's the main cause for revocations. So if you look at those statistics supplied to the legislature, how many concealed carry permittees get arrested versus how much of the Colorado general population gets arrested. People who don't have a concealed carry permit are about 50 times more likely to get arrested than somebody with a concealed carry permit. The criminal at the King Soopers wasn't a guy with a concealed carry permit. Every infamous crime you can look at in the history of the state of Colorado was never committed by somebody with a concealed carry permit. So what does the legislature want to do? We want to crack down on the people with concealed carry permits.
How are they going to do this?
They are going to allow, well, first of all, like we talked about, to say that your gun, which is perfectly legal under Colorado state law to carry concealed, they can outlaw various models of guns or magazines and forbid that. They can also, and this bill is actually something that will cause more mass shootings. Because in Colorado, well, first of all, the current law is if you have private property, you can exclude anyone you want from it. If you say no guns in my
Right.
bank or my restaurant or whatever, totally fine to do. That's the private property owner's right. If you're the government and you want to say, well, we don't want people bringing guns into some government office building, you can also do that and create a real gun-free zone, but the rule is you have to have metal detectors there. So if you're going to say the most law-abiding population in Colorado, those people with concealed carry permits, can't bring a gun into a government building, then just put up metal detectors there so that nobody can bring
Right.
a gun in, other than the
Yeah.
police and security guards. And so that's a real gun-free zone.
So let me see, are we still talking only about the preemption law?
We're talking about the preemption law.
So what they're going to do with the preemption law, it also affects concealed carry.
Yes.
Now that, and before the preemption law, before the statewide concealed carry, there was a patchwork of laws, and you had some sheriffs that would give a concealed carry permit to anybody who was qualified. And then you had sheriffs like the guy in Denver who wouldn't give it to anyone. And he would be able to say, I like you, judge, and judges would always be able to get a concealed
Right.
carry. But you who are worried about your ex-boyfriend killing you, no, I'm sorry, that's not. And the law that we have in Colorado is a shall issue. If you meet these requirements, if you've been trained, if you've been fingerprinted, if you've had the background check, if you do these things, then we shall, not might, shall. When this preemption, we shall give you a concealed carry permit. When this preemption law is repealed, then we can go back to this feudal state of different places having different...
It preserves the issuance of permits. It just allows cities to make them near useless. And at the House State Affairs hearing recently, the sponsor explained, oh yeah, you'll still be able to get your permit, and they don't change the law that says you can't be arrested for having your gun lawfully in your car for protection while you're driving. But she says then when you step out of the car, then you may
you have no protection.
Then you may get arrested. And so instead of having what the law properly allows, which is real gun-free zones, supported by metal detectors. You will have instead these pretend gun-free zones where with no metal detectors, you just post something so the law-abiding people don't carry into there, but the criminals waltz right in, uninterrupted, and now that the victims inside the building have been disarmed, that's exactly the place where mass shootings typically take place. The Washington,
including my King Soopers, which did not allow concealed carry.
So the Washington Post did after Trump said 98% of shootings take place in gun-free zones, the Washington Post did a fact check of that, and they gave him 2 Pinocchios because they said, well, he didn't really provide full context. So here's what the Washington Post, not known as an excessively pro-gun newspaper, said is the reality. For mass shootings that happen outside of someone's residence, 86% of those take place in locations where licensed carry by law-abiding citizens is prohibited.
Wow.
So
that's stunning.
So this is a bill to create more easy access to disarmed victims. And we know there are three.
At the same time, other states like Texas are passing what's called constitutional carry, which says, hey, if you're legal to buy a gun, you're legal to carry a gun. So we see states that are going in the opposite direction, allowing people, particularly as crime is expanding, to protect themselves better and to stop these mass shootings. I'm always amazed how when a shooting is prevented by someone who's armed, that gets no coverage. Even the celebration in the New Life Church down in Colorado Springs, which could have been
the pastor said that the licensed carrier, Jeannie Assam, a former police officer who shot the guy who came in to try to murder everyone in the church, she saved hundreds of lives.
It's just, it is amazing how defenseless they want us to be. All right, let me throw one other thing out there. I remember in 2013, every anti-gunny, every gunphobe said, this is not about banning any guns. We're not banning any guns. We are just limiting magazine capacity to 15. Well, I keep a little list of guns that are now banned in Colorado because not every gun is made with a 15 or less magazine. So I can buy a Springfield XD, for instance. I can buy the gun, but I can't have the 17-round magazine which comes with it, so I can only use the gun as a paperweight, not as a gun.
Right.
For all intents and purposes, it is a banned gun in Colorado.
Right. Well, and also we're going to have lots of local gun bans, and they will tell you, oh, this is about weapons of war and things like that, which is a flagrant lie. Not one of the guns they're banning is used by any military in the world. But so here's what, for example, what Boulder, with its old law and then what will be the new law again, calls an assault weapon. If you have an ordinary long gun with a wooden stock, looks like Grandpa's old hunting rifle, but it has a hole in the stock so that you can put your thumb in, which gives you a better, more secure grip on the gun, that is supposedly an assault weapon, which is prohibited, was and will be prohibited in Boulder. And in fact, the thumb hole stock because it gives you a more secure grip, it makes the gun more stable and more accurate and therefore safer. So this is not about gun safety. It's not about gun violence. It's not about gun violence prevention. These are bills to encourage that will, in fact, lead to more mass shootings.
Why will it increase mass shootings?
Because it'll create more zones where mass shooters seem to prefer. 5 out of 6 mass shooters prefer gun-free zones. And putting aside mass shootings, it's also a bill to encourage sexual assault, which supposedly the Democrats in the legislature claim they're against. The 2003 Concealed Carry Act said that the permit to carry is valid throughout the state, and they made some exceptions for it. Of course, private property, and likewise K through 12 schools, with certain exceptions, like if the gun's in your car, in the parking lot for a pickup. But at college campuses, adults over 21 who can carry anywhere else in the state can't be prohibited from carrying on state university campuses. We've had that law since 2003. Have the proponents been able to say, oh, all these hysterical predictions they made, somebody's going to get mad about Shakespeare and, no, King Lear was right. And the student pulls out his gun and threatens the professor, or, I got a B- and I really deserved a B+.
Since 2003,
none of that happened.
Guns on college campuses have protected women, particularly. Even before that, CSU, before it turned into the socialist factory it's turning into, also allowed guns on campus for about a decade before that without that incident. Without any incident except people defending themselves. So again, let's go through, because we're going to run out of time. It's not just this preemption law, which I think is the big one, because what they're going to do is then create a patchwork of laws and make me a criminal again for owning what I own. And this is what upset me so much. I did nothing, all right? I did nothing. I have an AR-15, which, by the way, if you recall, I bought the magazines because you only had a certain amount of time to buy those magazines before they were illegal. I know sometime I might want an AR. So there I am with a box of AR magazines, and so I better buy an AR. So I buy an AR. So, by the way, anti-gunnies, thank you. Now I have at least one AR, and it's spectacular. I followed the law. I've done what they wanted, but when they passed the law, I became a criminal. Now, I could have registered my gun, I could have brought it to the authorities, paid for another background check, paid for a permission slip, and bring my private property to the state, to the cops, to go, yes, that's okay for you to have. I refused to do that. And I made it very clear. Come and get my guns. Just get it over with. I'm not going to fight you. I'm not going to have a standoff. I ask you, please wait till my kids are out of the house and just come and take them and charge me. Get it over with and prove what this is really about, which is the ultimate goal is confiscation of guns.
Well, and then once you get arrested, then our executive vice president can take over and we'll have a more orderly organization.
So everybody wins.
Right. So it's the same thing as what Donald Trump did after San Bernardino. 2 Pakistani immigrants who never should have been in this country in the first place perpetrate a heinous mass murder. And so Trump announces we're going to have a complete ban on Muslims entering this country. Well, some peaceful guy from Lebanon, who's a scholar and, visiting professor someplace, he didn't cause the San Bernardino crime. He's innocent. But Trump's malicious, rampant bigotry says let's crack down on and persecute all Muslims because 2 of them perpetrated crimes. We have another crime in Colorado, and actually perpetrated by someone whose family were immigrants from Syria. So the Democrats say, we're not going to crack down on Muslims, we're going to crack down on gun owners and persecute them. And yes, the goal is confiscation, registration, which they're working on now to get every gun in a government database, sets up confiscation. That's the way it worked in Bloomberg's New York and everywhere else in the world.
Including Australia, where
yes.
there was mass confiscation.
Yes.
You used the word bigotry. I want to jump on that for a second.
Yeah.
And I mentioned it before. The elite in Boulder, the white elite in Boulder, the rich white elite in Boulder hate people like me. That's it. They hate me for my lifestyle. Now, this is Boulder, which took such a lead in making it safe for gay people to live.
Yes.
They started a gay civil union registry, so people who chose what people thought was a bad lifestyle could do so. They were one of the first cities to do that. They've reached out for immigrants and tried to help them. They talk about diversity. But my lifestyle, because it includes a gun with a pistol grip, they want me out. That's all this is. They want to make it clear, in our lily white town, we don't want your type. And we'll just keep making it more and more difficult until you finally leave.
Yeah, they're no different from, a lot of the Democratic Party is pretty tolerant of anti-Semites and Jew haters. So it's not a party. Back when my dad was first elected to the legislature in 1964, and then the first of what would be 11 terms in the legislature, the ethos of the Democratic Party in Colorado was you absolutely can't be bigoted. You can't be against blacks, you can't be against Jews, all these things. Well, that's changed a lot. Now it's actually fine if you're a Democrat and you don't like Jews very much and don't think they should have their own state, so they can have one place in the world where they're not mass murdered, because the rest of the world hasn't done very good on protecting Jews from mass murder. And of course you can be a bigot against today, against gun owners or lots of other groups that are on the wrong side of the cultural divide. The tolerance...
If you're a tobacco user or a vapor, we don't want you in our town.
The tolerance is only for people who think in a very narrow way. And within that, you can be any race you want, although if you happen to be white, that's disfavored, but at least that's allowed for the time being.
The idea that they talk about tolerance, and they celebrate tolerance, and then they do the opposite. These are not stupid people. I remember when we were kids, I remember when the left actually stood up for political minorities, when the ACLU went to bat for neo-Nazis, when the TV shows talked about the right of due process and you're innocent until proven guilty, and all that's gone. Hey, we're going to run out of time, so I want to keep going. What are the other bills that this legislature will pass? And by the time this airs, might have already.
Well, when the Colorado's background check law is uniquely restrictive in one particular way. It's the only state that says you can be denied buying a gun based on merely if we find an arrest record rather than a conviction. Now, supposedly in this country, we have the principle of innocent until proven guilty. So, and of course, lots of people who are arrested are in fact innocent and are not convicted of any offense. Under the law that was passed by the legislature for background checks, written by then Senator Mike Kaufman, if you're looking in the data, older criminal law databases aren't always complete. So you look in the database and you find, this guy was arrested in North Carolina in 1993, and we don't know what happened to the case. The current Colorado law says, okay, well, we're going to deny. Colorado is one of the very few states that denies on arrest. But then it says, okay, then the Colorado Bureau of Investigation has 30 days to find out and, try to go to North Carolina and get what records and see what happened in this case. And after 30 days, if they can't come up with a record of a conviction, then you let the purchase go ahead. That's the current law. It's very strict, but it's also fair in that
you are innocent until proven guilty.
And you get 30 days.
Right.
And of course, the practical reality is you frequently go to North Carolina or whatever. It's like, we had this record from 1979 or 1991. We don't know what happened to the case. Nobody in the state knows what happened to the case. There is no final disposition anywhere. This new bill will say, okay, fine, then it's a permanent ban. You got arrested someplace decades ago, and you're banned for life.
I knew a kid who got arrested for pouring weed killer or grass killer on a rival high school's lawn.
Yes.
So it was a prank, but it was illegal.
Yeah.
He has an arrest record.
Yeah.
And so the guy who did that in Kansas 20 years ago now cannot have a gun permanently. Now this is the same people who are pushing this.
I'm not sure that to be fair, that kind of vandalism, that's not a prohibited offense.
But if you don't know what it is,
right.
If you don't know, if the records don't show, what happened to that case,
right.
But the point being, these are the same people who are working so hard, rightfully so, I think, to help ex-cons get employment. They're talking about things like banning the box because your past is your past. But at the same time, if you weren't convicted of anything, you'll lose your constitutional right to keep and bear arms.
Yes.
That's terrifying. This is fascist crap here.
There was a time when my dad, who was a very strong ACLU supporter, big due process, cared a lot about constitutional rights. That was a very comfortable position, typical for lots of Democrats in the state legislature. Due process exists in their minds, sometimes for people who are arrested for perpetrating violent crimes, for the meth addict who's the repeat shoplifter who goes around threatening people in Boulder on the mall. Those guys, they get in and out of jail in minutes and get released to go re-victimize the same people the same day. So that's due process in the view of the legislative majority. As for law-abiding people, or the guy who did get arrested in Kansas in a case of mistaken identity or misinformation, but they can't find the records on the fact that the case was dismissed because the prosecutor urged the case to be dismissed, that guy's banned from guns for life in Colorado. It is a more
all right, so we've got the preemption,
state.
Getting rid of preemption. We've got the idea of making it harder for people, even if they've never been convicted, to get a gun. There's also now a safe storage bill, which says inside my own walls. The same people who rightfully say, hey, what you do in your bedroom is your own business, and the government has no right to tell you what to do, now are telling you if you're keeping a gun in your bedroom, it better be locked up, even if that's not what you want.
Right, and that's already become law, and the concept isn't unreasonable. But as usual, when you have the billionaire gun ban lobbies, and of course Michael Bloomberg's, the firepower of his army of bodyguards is enough to knock over a small country, and you can bet his bodyguards aren't limited to the 10-round magazines he wants everybody else to be stuck with. They say, oh, well, actually, yes, you can have your, when you're sleeping, you can have your handgun on the bedside table because it's as close to you as if you were wearing it on your body. That's allowed. But suppose instead of a handgun for defense, you have a shotgun for defense in the home, like a lot of people do, or they prefer, or a rifle, because it's whatever fits ergonomically best for a person. What if you wanted to keep it in your closet instead of on your bedside table? Well, maybe the closet's 15 feet away from your bed. That's that's illegal now. To keep your gun, your defensive gun, in your closet rather than in your bedside table. And again, so all the talk of don't micromanage.
Get out of my bedroom.
Get out of my bedroom. Well, no, they want to be in your bedroom.
These type of laws are not only attacking political minorities, they attack minorities. These are the type of laws that are rarely used as a primary offense. I don't think they're going to be bursting into our bedrooms with their flashlights going, with a piece of measuring tape to see how far away your gun is from your bedside table. But when somebody is arrested, these are the type of violations that are then added on at the prosecutor's discretion.
Yeah.
And who gets hassled most by these kind of laws? Often black people who get pulled over in their car and go, wait a second, you got a gun there. No, that has 16 rounds. Well, that's another reason.
Well, but it's legal where I have the gun, says the black person that got pulled over. Oh, but you drove through Boulder.
Right.
And so it's...
Yeah, right. And so it's amazing to me that those who claim that they're out for social justice are in fact promoting bigotry almost at every turn when it comes to guns.
Yes, which tells you that their meaning of social justice doesn't really... They have a specialized meaning of it, which means centralized government control of people's lives at a very micro level.
You gave me 3 of the bills. Is there a 4th one?
There's a 4th one that revises the procedures for people who are subject to domestic violence, protective orders, to have to surrender their guns. I've read that. I won't say anything against that right now. I'm not enough of an expertise on that particular subject.
All right. Our governor, Jared Polis, is not an anti-gun guy, I don't think. He has called you when he was a congressman to get clarification on different gun issues. As in so many other cases, I think this is a case where just like Joe Biden, our governor cannot, will not, refuses to stand up to the socialist wing of his party. Does this governor know better? You know him.
Oh, of course he does, and he is in his own way a libertarian at heart. Although, if he went to a Libertarian Party meeting, they might find a lot of things he disagrees.
Just because you're pro-pot doesn't make you a libertarian.
But I think he has more of an inclination in that direction than just pot or gay marriage and things like that. But
certainly not seeing it.
But the Democratic Party has changed, and part of that change has been Michael Bloomberg has gotten a lot more efficient and knowledgeable about how he spends his wealth, and he has built a strong anti-gun infrastructure within the party, made lots of donations to say, and right now, of course, if you're in, there are Democratic legislators who have said to their Republican colleagues, I know this preemption bill is awful, but if I vote against it, I'm going to get primaried. And when your primary opponent happens to have a multi-billionaire behind him, that's a serious threat. Same thing at the governor's level. Yes, he knows better.
And no, he won't veto any of these.
No, he won't. No, because the whole bill was worked out in advance, and part of the deal that got made is he knew how toxic and nuclear a statewide ban on so-called assault weapons would be. And so he gave them lots of other things, and they rationally said, yeah, instead of this big thing, which would be the top story in the legislature for months, and be politically harmful for the Democrats, instead we're going to give you actually something better. We're going to weaponize the state government on a permanent basis against you. We are going to eviscerate concealed carry in places. We're going to wipe out carry on campus so that the sexual assaulters and the mass shooters can have a safe zone, and that'll make you all happier. He gave them actually much more with these various bills than a statewide ban on so-called assault weapons would have amounted to.
You mentioned Michael Bloomberg and that nobody can stand up to him if they're in the Democratic Party, and that's why our governor will cave in, and so many other good, usually pro-gun Democrats. I mean, it used to be when your father was in the legislature, Democrats were as pro-gun as Republicans. There wasn't much difference because
I wouldn't go that far, but I'd say
there were many of them who were ranchers. You think
absolutely.
about Roy Romer, who sold farm equipment.
Well, Roy shot a buffalo once or something, and thinks he's an intrepid hunter. But yeah, you had people like Ben Nighthorse Campbell. Yes, Democrats from rural Colorado would typically vote with their district and be skeptical of gun laws that were more symbolic than really effective.
But my point being, we used to have a balance to Bloomberg. On another side, we had the NRA, 5 million members strong, deep pockets because those of us who care gave them money to protect our rights. They've been vilified, they've been attacked, and the NRA, as it stands today, doesn't have the resources to put up the right fight it needs in so many areas to take on Bloomberg.
Well, they've spent more money on legal fees for their self-inflicted legal troubles than they did on getting Donald Trump reelected, for example.
Want to add anything else to that one? Does that mean people shouldn't be given to the NRA?
The NRA is actually, legally speaking, several different corporations.
Right.
So there's General IRA, which has the problems. Separate from that is the Institute for Legislative Action.
You said IRA, you meant NRA.
NRA,
so
right.
You have the NRA, which is...
IRA is a terrible organization. There's the National Rifle Association in general. There is separately the Institute for Legislative Action, which is their politics and lobbying, and that's separate and hasn't had the management problems. There's separately from that the NRA Foundation, which is
a C3 foundation. If you give to it, it's tax deductible.
Yeah, now they can't spend money on lobbying and things like that, but what they do on genuine safety education and things like that is very constructive.
Research.
Right, that's right. And there's also the NRA Civil Rights Defense Fund, which supports legal cases and things like that. So all of those, it's only NRA General Operations that has had this management problem.
I'm not giving up my life membership in the NRA.
Or my benefactor membership, which is 3 levels above life. So if Hinduism is true and I get reincarnated 3 times, whatever happens, I'm still getting the magazine for free.
And people should keep doing that. And also people should help you out in that your funding has helped you over the decades do the legal work so that we've had these court victories like the Heller decision, the McDonald decision, the preemption law here in Colorado, concealed carry, not only in Colorado, but over the nation. And you have been a key player for that. And it's what I think the left understands better, which is when you put money in these long-term people that can actually work day in and day out to build part of this infrastructure, you win. We've won because of you, and we need to keep you going.
Well, thank you. And it's as the left understands, things germinate. Back when I started working at the Independence Institute full-time in 1992, I was the only person at any think tank in the United States who spent over half of his time on Second Amendment related issues. Now there are lots of them. I mean, because you show the way, you help people get started, you mentor, all those things, and now there is much more of a infrastructure of lawyers and of scholars who work on the issue in a fair-minded way.
Yeah, not only in the courts as helping plaintiffs, as I am one on the Boulder law, but also doing the intellectual legal arguments in law journals and legal reviews and all the rest. And I've also got to say, you've been a real pain in the ass for me, because while we proudly say, yes, the Second Amendment is part of our mission, there were a lot of people who go, I love everything else about you, but guns, no. And it makes fundraising tough. I think we've now come to the point where people go, oh, now I get why the Independence Institute put the Second Amendment right up there with all the other important issues of freedom. So I want you to pay back all the donations I couldn't raise because of your great work.
That sounds fair.
Okay, we'll get that done. People are pissed off. Let's leave it with this last question. We've just painted a really bleak picture in Colorado, a very bigoted, hateful picture against people who have a different lifestyle with guns. Give us a ray of hope. What should they be doing?
As Frederick Douglass said, people will be oppressed to the exact extent that they allow themselves to be. So Frederick Douglass was, among other things, a pro-gun, pro-voting rights Republican. But you don't have to be a Republican, of course, to be pro-Second Amendment or be pro-voting rights. But people need to get active, and this kind of learned helplessness is one of the things that the hard left, not what in the 60s and 70s were genuine liberals, but the hard, more authoritarian left wants to inflict on people. Oh, give up, you don't have any chance, it's all lost. Don't even try to fight back. That's the response they want. Well, in fact, when people do fight back, they win. You know, look at Washington, D.C. In Washington, D.C. in 1977, you couldn't even own a handgun in your home. Now in Washington, D.C., not only can you own a handgun in your home, you can get if you're just a regular person, you can get a permit to carry a handgun for lawful protection in Washington, D.C. So even in the worst jurisdictions, things can be fixed by victories in the courts and by political victories. So people, and by what we do at Independence, not only the courts and, testifying on bills, but broader cultural communication and informing people. So never give up. Bloomberg wants you to give up and think that he's omnipotent, but he's not omnipotent to the extent that people fight back.
I am worried about the culture.
Peacefully.
Or do you want to make that clear?
Yes.
All right. I agree. It's really easy to give up. It's really easy to go, I'm going to go to Wyoming, I'm going to go to Texas, someplace where I'm treated better. But be careful. It follows you. And the next generation, I'm not fighting for my gun rights for me. I want to make sure my kids have those gun rights in the future, and their kids have those gun rights. It is a cornerstone of security, not only for themselves, but for the nation. Thanks for doing all you do. Pay me back. Stop stealing the beer around here. Get back to work.
I agree on everything except the beer.
Fair enough. If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.